One of the most counterintuitive patterns in perfectionism is how often it produces procrastination rather than extra effort. If the internal standard for a piece of work is impossibly high, then starting carries real risk. The risk of immediately falling short of that standard in a way that's now visible and undeniable. Not starting, by contrast, keeps the imagined perfect version intact, untested and unfalsified. This is why perfectionists so often describe waiting for the right moment, or doing extensive research and planning that never quite turns into action. It isn't laziness, it's a nervous system protecting itself from the specific pain of an imperfect first attempt by avoiding the attempt altogether. The tragedy is that this avoidance usually produces the exact outcome it was trying to prevent: rushed, last-minute work that falls even further short of the standard than an earlier, calmer attempt would have. Breaking this loop rarely comes from trying harder to start. It comes from deliberately lowering the bar for a first attempt, giving yourself explicit permission to produce something rough, on the understanding that a rough draft can always be improved, but a blank page cannot. Alongside procrastination sits its close cousin, chronic over-preparation. Rehearsing a 5-minute conversation for an hour beforehand, researching a decision long past the point where more information would actually help, redrafting a document that was already good enough 3 drafts ago. On paper, this looks like conscientiousness. In practice, it's an attempt to eliminate uncertainty entirely before acting. An impossible goal that guarantees the preparation never quite feels sufficient. This creates a strange, exhausting paradox. The more someone prepares in an attempt to feel ready, the more aware they become of everything that could still go wrong, because more preparation surfaces more possible failure points, not fewer. The feeling of being behind rarely reflects an actual lack of preparation. It reflects a standard that keeps generating new requirements faster than they can be met. A more workable approach involves setting a preparation limit in advance, deciding what ready enough looks like before starting, rather than letting the feeling of readiness be the finish line, since for a perfectionist nervous system, that feeling may never arrive on its own. Perfectionism frequently travels alongside all or nothing thinking, where an outcome is filed into one of exactly 2 categories: complete success or total failure, with almost nothing real in between. A project that went 80% well gets remembered primarily for the 20% that didn't. A single piece of critical feedback outweighs 10 pieces of positive feedback in the same conversation. At work, this shows up as a kind of chronic dissatisfaction that has little to do with actual performance. Promotions, praise, and genuinely strong results can all be quietly discounted because they don't erase the memory of the one mistake, the one moment of feeling caught out. Colleagues and managers may find this confusing, since from the outside, the performance looks strong and consistent. The way out isn't forcing positivity or ignoring real mistakes. It's building a more accurate, multi-point way of evaluating outcomes, deliberately naming what went well alongside what didn't, so the mind has to actually process both, rather than defaulting to whichever one confirms the harshest existing belief. Perfectionism doesn't stay contained to tasks and deadlines. It often extends into how people relate to themselves and others. A perfectionist standard applied to relationships can look like never quite trusting that you've said the right thing, replaying a normal conversation for hours afterwards, or struggling to accept an apology or compliment because some part of the interaction wasn't handled flawlessly. It can also, less obviously, extend outward, holding partners, friends, or family to the same impossibly high, often unspoken standards applied to oneself. When someone else makes an ordinary mistake, it can trigger a disproportionate reaction, not because the mistake was severe, but because the nervous system doesn't have a category for ordinary, forgivable human error, only for right and wrong. This frequently creates a quiet loneliness, even inside close relationships, because genuine intimacy requires being seen making mistakes and staying safe anyway. An experienced perfectionism, by its very nature, tries hard to avoid. Real change here usually starts small, deliberately letting one imperfect moment go unaddressed and noticing that the relationship survives it completely intact. Perhaps the clearest long-term cost of perfectionism is its close relationship with burnout. Burnout isn't only caused by working too many hours. A growing body of research points to the absence of a genuine internal finish line as an equally significant driver. If nothing ever feels quite good enough, the nervous system never receives a clear, believable signal that it's safe to stop and rest. This produces a particular kind of exhaustion, not the tiredness that follows sustained effort and is resolved by rest, but a background hum of never-quite doneness that persists even during time off. Holidays get spent thinking about work that could have been better. Weekends carry a low simmer of guilt about tasks left unfinished, even when, by any reasonable measure, enough had already been done. Addressing this requires something perfectionism instinctively resists: deciding, in advance and on purpose, exactly what done looks like for a given task, and then treating that point as genuinely finished, not as a pause before more polishing. This is uncomfortable at first, precisely because it removes the open-ended striving perfectionism relies on. But it's also the only way the nervous system eventually learns that rest doesn't have to be earned through flawlessness. Across procrastination, over-preparation, all-or-nothing thinking, relationship strain, and burnout, the same underlying pattern keeps showing up. A nervous system that has learned to treat good enough as dangerous and flawless as the only path to safety. None of these patterns respond well to sheer willpower or simply deciding to care less, because the goal was never really about the work itself. It was about staying safe from an old kind of pain. On Friday, we move from recognizing these patterns into genuinely practical territory. How to build real tolerance for imperfection, how to redefine what done means before you start, and what a realistic, honest timeline for change actually looks like. If even one of today's patterns felt familiar, that's useful information, not something to feel embarrassed about. It's simply where the real work begins.